The future of human race would depend not just on the protection of the environment today, but also in the creation of such a world wherein the environment does not need any protection. There is a saying that the greatest threat to our planet is the perception that someone else will save it. नमस्कार, मैं हूं गहना वैष्णवी और आज के संवाद का विषय है एनवायरमेंट, सस्टेनेबिलिटी एंड कल्चर एंड इंटरफेस। और आज के हमारे स्पीकर हैं प्रोफेसर सिमरित कहलो। She is a professor and chairperson of the Center of Advanced Study in Geography in Department of Geography, Panjab University, Chandigarh. Before she joins, I would like to say a few words about her. Professor Simrit Kahlonji hails from the family of soldiers. 4 generations of her family have served in the Indian Army. She holds a special place in her heart for the armed force and has written a great deal about the Indian armed force to create a positive image in the minds of the public at large. For her endeavor, she was commended by the Army Commander at the Northern Command, Lieutenant General K.T. Parnaik. As the professor of the Department of Geography, Panjab University, she has introduced the course of Culture Geography at the department. The study of man-land relations with particular reference to mountain environments and mountain cultures form the focus of research of her PhD students currently which she is supervising. In addition to offering research supervision, she has also successfully completed an ICSSR sponsored research project on man-land relations in Lahul Valley of Himachal Pradesh. An avid traveler, she has frequently visited the Himalayas and has widely published on the issues of geopolitical and developmental concern with regard to the Valley of Kashmir as well as the larger region. She has teaching experience for more than 25 years and she has published various research articles in reputed journals. She has also served as an expert at various state public service commissions. She is also a member of Faculty of Arts, Panjab University since the year January, since 2015, and is also a member of Academic Council of Panjab University. She is also a member board. She is also serving as a board member in several institutions across Punjab. She was nominated as an expert on the panel for gender empowerment and declining sex ratio in Punjab by the Secretary to the Government, Department of Planning, Punjab, in the year 2007. She also was a consultant on the international research project titled Gender Migration and Care, the changing position of India in the global nursing care chain. नमस्कार स्मृति जी।
नमस्कार जी, नमस्कार।
आज का जो ये टॉपिक है एनवायरनमेंट, सस्टेनेबिलिटी एंड कल्चर एंड इंटरफेस, इसके टॉपिक पर मैं कुछ चंद सवाल आपसे करना चाहूंगी। In recent times, there has been a rise in environment-related problems. Can you highlight some of these and throw light on the circumstances? In recent times, there has been rise in the environment-related problems. Could you highlight some of these and throw light on circumstances that have led to the rise of such problems?
Yes, one, I would like to first highlight some of the environment-related problems. The chief one being climate change. Okay. Because I am putting climate change at number 1 because it is associated with a host of other problems that become more visible to us. Actually, climate change is a phenomena that doesn't happen over a day. It happens over a number of years. But what becomes visible to us are something what we call natural disasters, which are the result of climate change. For instance, we have cloud bursts, we have avalanches, we have dry spells, then we have these cyclones, untimely cyclones, and sometimes we have a lot of precipitation, sometimes we have no precipitation at all. Sometimes all of a sudden the temperature shoots up, and sometimes, we have a very cool summer also. So all these are, they many times they result in kind of a kind of a disaster. For instance, a very recent one has been in Dharamshala, where we said we were facing a cloud burst, and that is one that I would like to talk about. And then there was another one in Leh, where we suddenly saw a lot of rain coming in what is otherwise a desert land. And then there was another landslide in Himachal, in Kinnaur. So all these are manifestations of mainly climate change. And the other, I think the second part of your question is that why this is happening.
Why? Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So now the reason why this is happening mainly is that, we are putting a lot of pressure on the environment.
Yes.
The environment can only give us so much, and the environment has set certain parameters, has set certain rules according to which we are supposed to function. Now, when we went in for in the 1950s, for instance, after the Second World War, the Second World War, you will recall, was one. The Second World War was won on the basis of technology, which was basically the nuclear bomb that won them the Second World War.
Yes.
Now, once the Second World War was won, they went on to make technology God, and the thinking was that if we have enough science, if we have enough development, we will be able to achieve anything. In the 60s, we were able to put a man on the moon. United States to do that, right? So we can control. We thought we can get water where there's no water. We can build dams. We can build huge bridges. We can connect all parts. We can do away with any amount of starvation. We can produce so much food, so on and so forth. So we went into a developmental mode. We went into a mode where we went, headlong into development with the help of technology, with the help of science. And we also started thinking that man was God, that we could achieve almost everything, that this whole earth was there, some kind of comforts for man. And let me also tell you that this kind of thought process, it came from the West. And even within the West, it came particularly from the United States of America, Anglo-America, because they had huge amount of resources. They did not have a very big population, and they just went and occupied that land. Of course, those people also came from Europe, and they also just before the 1950s, if we look back in history, they had gone and colonized large parts of Asia and Africa and even Australia. So this was a tendency, this was a thought process where we thought we can conquer nature. Now, nature is something that we can never conquer. If we go back to our own roots, we always respect nature, we worship nature. This was a mistake that we made, where we tried to put too much pressure on the environment. We thought we can build roads where there are no roads. We thought we can build dams. We thought we can cut down trees, so on and so forth. So this is just, environment which is answering back, which is taking its own area, it's taking its own domain back into its, you can say into its lap. So it is reacting. This is the reason why so many environmental disasters are happening.
So what can be the potential clean forms of energy which we can use without affecting the environment? जो आजकल का चला है sustainable development, that has been always.
That is an important question. It is also linked with environment in the sense that our society is also an energy-driven society.
Yes.
There are two forms of energy. We have animate energy and we have inanimate energy. Today, if I choose to cycle to work, I'm using animate energy. But when I, just press a button and my car starts and I zoom to work. That is inanimate energy. Now that energy is being drawn from the environment in some manner. And mostly we have so far been using the exhaustible sources of energy. We have been using primarily fossil fuels. First, it was coal, and it was coal that brought in the first industrial revolution that we had. The massive, it was based basically on, and then of course there was the discovery of petroleum, so that brought in another kind of automobile revolution, and which has kind of continued so on. So now what is happening with this kind of technology or this kind of energy is that it is creating a lot of pollution in the environment. That is one part of it.
Yes.
It is also leading to other kinds of problems. For instance, we are doing some kind of damage to our own systems because we have gone into lifestyle modes where we are too laid back, where we are too relaxed, and our morning starts with fossil fuel energy, in the sense of maybe even if we are using an alarm clock which is in our mobile, we are charging that battery, we're using electricity for that, that is coming from somewhere where we are using coal, and so on and so forth. So in this primarily because this leads to a lot of pollution, we need to get away from unclean energy, because this is creating pollution in the environment. The other thing, of course, is that these are exhaustible sources. So when we look at clean sources of energy, what are those sources of energy? We have water for one. We can use hydro energy. Now, hydro energy has also, over time, it has become a kind of a traditional source or a conventional source of energy, because we have been using it for some time now. The problem with hydro energy is that when we build artificial dams, one way of getting hydro energy is that there's a natural waterfall. The natural water falls on the turbine. And, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please continue.
Okay, so what has happened now is we were talking about clean sources of energy.
Yes.
Water now, you see, it is certainly a clean source of energy, but it is creating other kinds of problems, in the sense that it is leading to a lot of displacement of people if we are building dams for the purpose of creating hydroelectricity and all that. So we have to look for still other sources of energy. Now, those sources of energy could be, for instance, solar energy. It could be wind energy. It could be even another clean source of energy is nuclear energy. But then, of course, if there is a problem with nuclear energy, it could lead to huge damage of unimaginable proportions if there is ever a accident with when we're using nuclear energy.
Just like Bhopal gas tragedy. Just like Bhopal gas tragedy, we were trying to create a clean form of energy.
The Bhopal gas tragedy, and then the Chernobyl, even before that, the Chernobyl disaster that had taken place. It was a huge, the interesting thing about it is that if we can use uranium for producing electricity, and we can also use thorium. Now, thorium is not that damaging. If we use thorium for the making of nuclear energy, it won't be damaging. It would be cleaner. It would be better. But we are stressing more on uranium-based energy. And why is it? Because we are also, researching more on uranium, because we are interested in making arms with that. We are interested in making defense equipment with that, which we will not be able to do if we are using thorium. So thorium is one source of energy which can be exploited, which can be used, which we are not paying much attention to. Another source of energy, in our case, particularly, for instance, in the state of Punjab or Haryana, this whole region, solar energy is a very good source of energy. And in fact, in all these spaces that we have, in all the institutional areas that we have, if we were to, put up solar panels, that would be such a good idea. So yes, we do need to go in for cleaner sources of energy, We need to go for cheaper sources of energy. We need to go for inexhaustible sources of energy. It's very, very important if we want to continue the lifestyles that we have chosen to lead today. So,
moving on to my next question, Professor, you talk about this sustainable development policies which have to be adopted. How would you define it? Please give a detailed explanation of how it can be achieved, sustainable development, in comparison to renewable energy.
Yes, sustainable development is actually an overarching concept where we talk about development also, we talk about energy also, the sources of energy we should be using and all this. Yes. Now, the idea behind sustainable development is that we should follow that pace and that mode of development wherein we are able to sustain that development over a long period of time, which essentially means that the lifestyles that we are enjoying today, the same lifestyles we are able to live for our future generations. So now the way that we have gone about development so far is that we have been using exhaustible sources of energy, which means that in times to come, let's say in 50 years to come, there will be no fuel. There will be no, they say there will be no petrol, there will be no fossil fuel, or they say there will be a very limited amount of coal also available. Yes. So now we need to shift to other, very fast and very quickly, we need to shift to other sources of energy. That is one part of sustainable development. Another part of sustainable development is that we have to respect nature. We have to respect the local context. We have to respect the local environment. If we do not respect the local environment, and if we always keep thinking that we can overcome the local environment and we can, like I'll give you one example. Just today, my daughter was talking to me and she says, she was asking me, she said, you know, don't you think that Chandigarh is a very efficient city and it's a very well-planned city? So I, started thinking and I gave her so many problems with Chandigarh. Yes. And one of the first problems with Chandigarh is that it is sited from a water source that is 40 kilometers away. Now, if you look back in history, all our civilizations came up in river valleys. Why did they come up in river valleys? Because you need a water source. Now, the perennial water source for Chandigarh is in Ropar. Can you imagine, if it had been the olden times and if women had to fetch water for their daily chores, a woman walking 40 kilometers and coming back 40 kilometers, uska din hi sara khatam ho jayega, wo kuch bhi nahi kar payegi. So now this is where we have done some amount of unsustainable development. We have set up a city where we don't have water. So now we get water from 40 kilometers away. उसमें कभी हमारी पाइपलाइन टूट जाती है, कभी कोई प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है, कभी कोई प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है. So and we don't know for how long we will be able to get that water. Okay. Another example of unsustainable development is the agricultural model that we have adopted in Punjab, the model of green revolution, where we, went in for, of course, it was done so that we could feed the nation. But what we did was we started growing high yielding varieties of crops, which needed more water, which needed more irrigation. And where did we get that water? We got it from subsurface sources of water, and this led to a depletion of our water sources. Okay. Now the result is that this whole area, fortunately Haryana has not gone in so much for this kind of agriculture. Haryana is still dependent on what we call brani kheti or rain fed agriculture. That's good. तो उनके पास पानी जितना है वो अभी तक बचा हुआ है. पंजाब में हमने पानी अपना सारा खत्म कर लिया. We have turned Punjab into a desert. So yes, for 60 years. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So for 60 years, this was a success. But now what after 60 years? So it's unsustainable. You get it? This is unsustainable development. We have to find ways and means of development which we can carry on over a long period of time. This is what we mean by sustainability.
Because the sources were not replenished with time when they were utilized.
Yes.
Yes,
we have to use resources at a rate or at a pace that they will last for the longest possible time. Okay. That is the idea of, and the other thing about sustainable development is that it should be for everybody. It should be equitable. That also required. So yeah.
So moving on to the next question, apart from solar energy, can biomass fuels be utilized to cover the ever-growing demand of electricity, because we are facing electricity cuts everywhere?
Yeah, biomass fuels is, a very good idea.
And
Electricity.
and my next question along with this, it is a twin question, ki what role can our culture play in mitigating environmental problems? Since you have already relayed the practices of Punjab with Haryana, so how we can cover this, please?
Okay, yes. That is important because culture is part of a local context, but I will come to that later. First, I'll talk about biomass fuels.
Yes.
You see, biomass fuels is a very, very good idea, and we should use it. It is very practical also. The only thing is that we may not be able to use it in every place because we may not always have land available to
Yes.
produce the required biomass that we need.
Okay.
You see, a lot of now in the last few years, for instance, suddenly the world had started facing food insecurity. We said there's not enough food. Even countries like US were saying that there's not enough food, and then the reason they had given was that China and India have started consuming more food. Okay. Now, actually, the problem was that they had devoted a lot of their land to corn cultivation, and they had started using corn for producing fuel, which is essentially, a kind of a biofuel. So now when you're going to use land which was earlier being used to produce food to produce fuel, you will have to go hungry because our population base is so large that we need every inch of land possible to grow food. Yes. And there are only two ways out of it. One is that we go in for high yielding varieties where small patches of land will give you more food. The other way out is that you go in for urban agriculture. Of course, biomass fuel is also possible in the urban context. We have a lot of spaces, which are empty spaces, which are not very useful or which are not very practical for building purposes, which are wastelands. So there you can explore the possibility of producing biomass fuels. Then you have, there's this huge amount of solid waste that we produce in all urban areas. They are a huge source of biomass fuel again. But that can happen only if we start segregating our waste into, plastics and anything that is biodegradable and anything that is not biodegradable. So these are everyday practices that we have to involve. Now, this is where, culture comes.
Okay.
Actually, when culture, let us first understand what is culture. Normally, we think that culture is to do with our songs, culture is to do with our dresses, culture is to do with our stories and things like that. No. Culture is actually the shared experience and the shared knowledge of a person. For instance, tomorrow, if I say that tomorrow is Raksha Bandhan. Yes. Okay. And or in the context of Punjab, I say tomorrow is Rakhad Punya. Yes. Now, Punya means it is a full moon, and it is Rakhad Punya, which means it's going to be Raksha Bandhan. So it will mean something for all Punjabis. Raksha Bandhan will mean something for all Indians, but Raksha Bandhan will mean nothing for a German. Correct? Now, this is because we have a shared culture. We have a common culture. जिसमें हमें सिखाया गया this is the meaning of this thing, or this is all that. And when I say Raksha Bandhan, so many things will come to my mind. There will be the full moon. There will be the brother and sister relationship. There will be, things about eating sweets. There will be things about exchanging gifts. There will be things about festivities, so on and so forth. And everything, all my memories that are associated with that. Now, this is what is culture. Basically, our shared historical experience. And this experience has been passed over through generations. Yes. So culture जो होता है आपका hundreds and thousands of years old, जितनी knowledge हमारे पास होती है, ये सारी knowledge को हम जमा करते हैं उसको हम understand करते हैं, उसको हम automatically करते हैं. We don't have to learn it through experience. It is passed on from generation to generation. A very good example of, culture, standing at the time of a natural disaster took place when we faced the tsunami. If you remember the tsunami of 2004, 2004 mein aayi thi na? The tsunami of 2004, so many people along the coasts perished. Yes. But there was one tribe, the Jarawa tribe, which was staying in the Andamans. And none of them, there were just about 6 members of that tribe that were there over there. And none of them perished in that. It was such an amazing thing because when the tsunami came, everybody was so scared that wo tribe jiske thode se log reh gaye wo khatam ho gayi hogi. But it was such a surprise for everybody that they had survived. Right. Now, how had they survived? They had survived because they had been taught to understand and read the behavior of animals and birds. It was part of their culture. They read the, strange behavior of birds, and they knew that there was some disaster that was impending. And they just moved on to high ground. They went into the mountains over there. You see, you have mountains in the center of the Andamans. So from the coast, they moved into the forests and the mountains. The tsunami came and it went and it left them untouched. Nothing happened to them. So this is how culture helps you in times of distress, because culture has made you, culture is used to dealing with that particular environment, with that particular local context. Now, anybody who was staying or who had gone to the Andamans or who had gone to the coastal areas from a place like Punjab would never understand something like this. Yes. I'll give you another example. We had gone to Lahore. Okay. Now in Lahore, you see, Lahore is a place that is, faced with a lot of avalanches. Very frequent avalanches you get in Lahore. Even now, very recently, there was an avalanche which had, it had blocked the passage of the Chenab River for some days. And, be faced with now what happens over there is that the avalanches, they come, the avalanche comes and destroys the village over there. Okay. Now, if you look at the monasteries that had been built over there, you see Laurel is a Buddhist culture and they have Buddhist monasteries. Now, the monasteries are built into and they are cut into the face of the rock, the mountain rock. So that, and there is normally an overhanging cliff, so that if an avalanche comes, the monastery is protected by that overhanging cliff. Nothing happens to the monastery. The avalanche will come. The snow will all pass by the monastery. Everybody in the monastery remains absolutely safe. Now, this is part of your culture. How we go about destroying this culture, or how do we, take ourselves or break ourselves away from culture? This is again an example that I will give you from Lahore. Lahore was an area which it was because they had very little flat land. Okay. So that meant there was very little possibility of agriculture. So that meant that there was very little possibility of supporting population. So what did they do? They decided firstly that we will go in for polyandry, which means that one woman over there, she gets married to 3-4 men. Now, if I look at polyandry over here in Punjab, I'll say, oh, it is such a notorious practice. It is such a bad practice. One lady living with 4 men. No, there was nothing wrong in that, because that meant that they could bring down their population. One lady would produce only 2 or 3 children out of 4 brothers. And she was living with 4 brothers over there. Then another thing that was part of their culture was that they would, during the winter, they could do nothing in the winter. It gets very, very cold over there. Even now it gets very cold in the winter. So the kind of Buddhism that they had, in Buddhism, you have monks. So normally the monks, you see, they will stay away from married life and everything. But yes, they evolved a new form of Buddhism. What was that? It was this, that the monk could go and meditate for 6 months and then could come back and enjoy family life for 6 months. Which meant that for 6 months, the monk would go into a monastery, his needs would be looked after in the monastery. And these were those 6 months when no agriculture was possible, when it was very cold, when they could not move out of their homes otherwise also. So us time pe, they, in this way, they cut down on their requirement for food by sending out, let's say, 2 men to the monastery. 2 men will go to the monastery, 1 man will stay behind with the lady over there and look after the animals and whatever is there in the house. So ये एक तरीका था उनका survival का. Culture teaches us the correct ways of survival. Then the kind of food they used to grow. They would grow barley. They would, eat barley, and then they would grow some amount of potato.
All right.
What happened gradually, you see, we introduced other kinds of foods in Lohal. वो हमने कैसे किया, हमने उनको बोला कि आप लोग यू ग्रो टेम्परेट वेजिटेबल्स. व्हाट आर टेम्परेट वेजिटेबल्स? ये सब जो एक्सोटिक वेजिटेबल खाते हैं ना, लेटस खाते हैं हम, ब्रोकली खाते हैं हम, all these things, and then we have those beautiful flowers, tiger lilies and all those. Now, all these things, they are not part of our environment. They cannot be grown in our environment. So we grow them in a very cold area like Lohal. Then we transport them from Lohal because we have the road where those trucks are coming from Ladakh. They bring back all this stuff. They will sell them in the markets of Delhi or Chandigarh or big cities like that.
Okay.
And the people in Lohal get a lot of money for that. So yeah, money is now always important, no? So they shifted their form of agriculture from growing barley to growing these kinds of vegetables, which they just sold in the market. And where did they get their food? We told them, okay, the government told them that we will give you food, we will give you free rations because it is a scheduled tribe area.
Yes.
We will give you free rations, they will come. And where will the rations come from? They will come from Punjab and Haryana because we are producing, we are फूड सरप्लस स्टेट्स. तो उनको हमने बार्ले से हटा के उनको हमने आटा और चावल खाना शुरू करवा दिया. They stopped eating barley, which was their local grain, and they started eating rice and wheat. The result is that if in a clean environment like Lohal also, today you are getting cases of cancer. पंजाब में हम कहते थे कैंसर आ गया क्योंकि हम पेस्टिसाइड यूज कर रहे हैं.
Yes.
अब जो पंजाब हरियाणा का वीट है, जो पेस्टिसाइड लेडन है या जो केमिकल लेडन है, वो हमने लाहौल तक भी पहुंचा दिया. वो लोग भी वही खाने लग गए, तो उनकी एनवायरमेंट्स में भी कैंसर चला गया, लद्दाख तक भी कैंसर चला गया. सो दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव डन बाय टेकिंग देम अवे फ्रॉम देयर कॉन्टेक्स्ट, जो उनका लोकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट था, जो उनका कल्चर था. तो जो आपका कल्चर है वो एक बहुत डीपली एंटवाइंड होता है आपकी एनवायरनमेंट के साथ, क्योंकि वो आपकी एनवायरनमेंट में पैदा होता है, एनवायरनमेंट में से पैदा होता है. व्हेनेवर वी ट्राई टू सर्वाइव, we live in an environment. जैसे early man, we talk about early man, he went looking for food, what kind of food he could find, and so on and so forth. A very interesting, another example that I will give you. Why do you think India became colonized? इंडिया के लिए इन्होंने जो सी रूट था वो क्यों ढूंढना इतना जरूरी था? आपने कभी सोचा?
नहीं, नो आइडिया.
इंडिया तक पहुंचना क्यों इतना जरूरी था? इंडिया तक पहुंचना इसलिए इतना जरूरी था क्योंकि इंडिया से यूरोपियंस जो थे वो स्पाइसेस लेके जाते थे.
Okay. Yes, that
और स्पाइसेस उनको क्यों चाहिए थे? व्हाई डिड दे वांट स्पाइसेस? बिकॉज इट वाज अ वेरी कोल्ड कंट्री. और वहां पे वो क्या करते थे, वो मीट जो थे वो समर में हंट कर लेते थे और विंटर तक वो प्रिजर्व करके रखते थे. अब विंटर में उसको प्रिजर्व करने के लिए वो स्पाइसेस यूज करते थे और उसको फिर स्मेल ना आए उसको कुक करने में भी स्पाइसेस यूज करते थे. वो स्पाइसेस उनको इंडिया से मिलती थी. तो जब एक ऐसा मौका आया जब ये टर्की वाला जो एरिया था वहां से उनका रास्ता बंद हो गया. पहले वो ओवरलैंड जाते थे, मार्को पोलो एंड ऑल दीस पीपल, दे यूज्ड टू गो ओवरलैंड थ्रू टर्की एंड अफगानिस्तान एंड ऑल दीस प्लेसेस. तो जब वो रास्ता बंद हो गया उन्होंने कहा अब क्या करें, एंड दे स्टार्टेड लुकिंग फॉर अ सी रूट टू इंडिया. And that is the reason why even the Americas got discovered, because they were trying to find India, कि India हम समुद्र के रास्ते हम India कैसे पहुंचे. So one of Columbus, he happened to sail towards the west. He reached an area which he called West Indies because it was an India towards in the Western Hemisphere. So this is how important, how culture can dictate things. Just because they needed pepper.
This shows India was culturally and monetarily and culturally rich even that time, कि उसको
even
ढूंढने के
that
लिए.
time, even that time,
Yes.
जो डाइवर्सिटी चाहे उसको मौसम में हो, चाहे वो रिवर्स में हो, चाहे वो वेजिटेशन में हो, वो सब जितनी इंडिया में है वो हमको कहीं भी नहीं मिलती. Because you see it has a huge extent. आप अगर अभी इस समय अगर आप केरला जाते हैं तो वहाँ पे एक डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ वेदर है, डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ बिल्कुल द वेदर ओवर देयर, द क्लाइमेट ओवर देयर, द वेजिटेशन ओवर देयर, the amount of rainfall over there is going to be so different from what we will find in Punjab and Haryana. Yes. And this is what gives us variety. This is what gives us the ability for producing so many different kinds of crops, so many different kinds of cloths. Yes. We imagine the kind of silks that we have. हमारे पास कितने किस्म के सिल्क हैं. जो कश्मीर की सिल्क है वो फर्क है, जो असम की सिल्क है वो बिल्कुल फर्क है, जो साउथ इंडिया की सिल्क है वो बिल्कुल फर्क है, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन देयर क्लाइमेट. ठीक है. So this is, and this is all dictated, or it becomes manifest in culture. Why do we?
Moving on to the next question, I want to know about J&K culture as well, because उस time का culture और आज के culture में बहुत फर्क आ गया. And since we talked about Kerala, we have talked about Himachal. I would want to talk about the crown of India, Jammu and Kashmir. उसका culture क्या था उस point of time में, और अब आपके culture में क्या है? How to integrate it now furthermore? So
हाँ, देखो, जम्मू एंड कश्मीर जो था या वो एक बहुत स्पेशल किस्म का एरिया था. एक तो इसलिए बिकॉज उसको इट वाज नॉट सो प्रोन टू इन्वेजन्स. इनिशियली इट वाज नॉट फॉर वेरी लॉन्ग, इट वाज नॉट प्रोन टू एनी काइंड ऑफ फॉरेन इनकर्शंस. कश्मीर तक जो भी पहुंचता था वो इंडिया के बीच में से होके जाता था. जैसे अगर वहां पे पहले जो राजा थे वहां पे हर्षवर्धन, he was one of the kings who stretched his empire into Nepal, and Kashmir had also become a part of that. Okay. And now the reason for this was that most of the foreign incursions, they used to come through Punjab. They would come through the Khyber Pass, or there's one more pass, Bombela over there. तो वहां से वो आते थे, तो वो कश्मीर होके नहीं आते थे, कश्मीर को वो बाईपास कर जाते थे. इसका फायदा कश्मीर को ये हुआ कि उनका एक बहुत पीसफुल कल्चर डेवलप हुआ. They were not used to many wars. They were not used to fighting. So, and which also meant that they became intellectually a very, very rich nation, intellectually a very, very rich people, and a cultural group that wrote a lot, that thought a lot. There was a lot of poetry over there. There was a lot of music that came out of Kashmir. The other thing about Kashmir was that it was, despite being in the mountains, it was a valley. और वैली का मतलब था कि वहां पे वो कल्टीवेशन कर सकते थे. तो वो फिर इस लहजे से भी वो बहुत अमीर था, क्योंकि उनको खाने की उनको कोई समस्या नहीं थी. They could produce their own food. So again, it was a culture that was self-sufficient, and they did not ever feel the need to move out. उनको कभी ये जरूरत नहीं पड़ी कि हम कश्मीर से बाहर निकलें. वो लोग बहुत खुशहाल थे, and they were very happy staying where they were. तो कश्मीर में जो आउटसाइड या एक्सटर्नल इन्फ्लुएंसेस आते हैं वो इंडिया के अंदर से आते हैं. वो दिल्ली से कश्मीर को जाते हैं. वो ज्यादातर से अफगानिस्तान से कश्मीर को नहीं आते, या ईरान से कश्मीर को नहीं आते. इसीलिए जो कश्मीर है उसमें वहां का जो इस्लाम भी है ना, वो वहाबी इस्लाम नहीं था, वो सूफी इस्लाम था, क्योंकि वो इंडिया में से कश्मीर को गया था, वो बाहर से पर्शिया से कश्मीर को नहीं गया था. So that is one thing which is very special about Kashmir. And then the fact that they were peace-loving people, they welcomed all kinds of influences. So जब यहाँ से influence जाता था उसको welcome करते थे, उसको अपनाते थे, और उसको कुछ वापस भी देते थे. So you look at the Mughal gardens, you look at the chinar. अब ये चिनार पेड़ है, वो हालांकि कश्मीर का लोकल ट्री नहीं है. जो गुलाब का फूल है या गुलाब का पौधा है वो कश्मीर का लोकल पौधा नहीं है. But because the weather, the climate over there was so good, it was so conducive that they adopted these plants as their own plants, as their own flora. और आज की डेट में आप देखें कि इंडिया का कोई और ऐसा हिस्सा नहीं है जहाँ पे इतनी प्रोफ्यूजन में आपको चिनार मिलेगा और इतनी प्रोफ्यूजन में आपको रोजेस मिलेंगे। रोजेस हमें मिलते हैं सब जगह पे, हमें ऑर्नामेंटल प्लांट्स मिलते हैं, पर अगर आप कश्मीर जाके देखेंगे तो रोजेस ऐसे उगे होते हैं जैसे घास उगी हुई है। And you know, in the summer it is there in such profusion and it is so beautiful to behold. सब जगह आपको गुलाबी गुलाब गुलाबी गुलाब नजर आते हैं। अगर आप थोड़ा सा लेट विंटर से पहले पहुंचते हैं तो चिनार इतने खूबसूरत लगते हैं आपको। So this was one thing about Kashmir. Then the kind of population in Kashmir, अगर हम उनके eating habits देखते हैं, Kashmiri Pandits were very different from the rest of the Pandits of India, for instance. They had a very specific kind of living style. They were एक तो मैंने already बताया, they were peaceful people, they were peace loving people, and they were intellectually very rich. तो ये हमेशा ही बहुत पढ़े लिखे थे. So because, and they were very advanced as compared to the rest of the population, which is the main reason why most of them were very sought after as, you know, prime ministers, as divans. हमारे जितनी भी रॉयल फैमिलीज या रॉयल हाउसेस हैं, अगर हम देखेंगे, यहाँ तक कि जो हैदराबाद के दीवान थे वो भी कश्मीर से थे। जो यहाँ पे हमारे अपने वन ऑफ आवर ओन Rajasthan mein, one of the royal houses in Jaipur, for instance, they had a divan from Kashmir. So in Punjab also we had people from Kashmir who were there as part in the, you know, court of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So they were always appreciated as very intelligent and people who could give good advice. This again was related to their culture. It was part of their culture. It was the long period of peace that they had seen over there. So they had, क्योंकि इन्होंने influences को welcome किया, इन्होंने उनको अपनाया, तो उनका culture जो था वो एक syncretic culture बना। वो जिसको हम कहते हैं ना कि वो गंगा जमुनी culture जो हम कहते हैं, जो संगम से बना या जो आपस में मिलने से बना। So that was another important part of that culture. For now, of course, we have forgotten about most parts of it, and there's just one instance I would like to quote. You know, when I had visited, this is not, of course, Kashmir, but it is south of the Pir Panjal की बात कर रही हूँ, मैं Chenab Valley की बात कर रही हूँ। वहाँ पे डोडा है एक, there is a settlement called Doda. तो I was there for about a week and I noticed, हम ना किसी के घर गए, वहाँ पे शादी थी, तो वो शादी में जब उन्होंने पेलेनक्विन उसमें जिसमें उसको डोली में जिसमें लेके जाते हैं, उसको दुल्हन को लेके जाते हैं, मैंने नोटिस किया कि वो उसके एक साइड पे ना they had written some inscriptions in the देवनागरी स्क्रिप्ट, और उसके दूसरी साइड पे उन्होंने पर्शियन स्क्रिप्ट में कुछ लिखा हुआ था। सो आई आस्क्ड, मैंने कहा ये इसका यहाँ पे क्या है और वहां पे क्या है, तो कहते हैं बहुत सिंपल सी बात है, जो हमारी शादी की ट्रेडिशंस हैं वो तो एक जैसी हैं, वो जो यहाँ पे मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन है वो भी लोकल ट्रेडिशन फॉलो करती है, जो हिंदू पॉपुलेशन है वो भी वही ट्रेडिशन फॉलो करती है। तो विच मीन्स कि पेलेनक्विन में जो भी बहू जाएगी वो डोली में बैठ के जाएगी। तो सही, तो कहते हैं जब हिंदू की शादी होती है तो हम ये वाला जिसपे हमने जो इंस्क्रिप्शन है, होली इंस्क्रिप्शन इन देवनागरी स्क्रिप्ट, हम उसको विजिबल कर लेते हैं। when it is on the other, when it is the Muslim wedding, तो हम दूसरी साइड से उसको विजिबल कर लेते हैं। It was such a sweet example of how both communities and all other communities also, they were living over there in perfect harmony. Similarly, you see, you have another kind of, if you move slightly ahead of Kashmir, beyond Kashmir, we go to Ladakh, for instance. तो वहाँ के जहाँ जो उनकी मैं अभी रिलीजन की बात करूंगी, क्योंकि रिलीजन एक बहुत बड़ा इशू बन गया हुआ है, for particularly in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. There are two kinds of religion. One is organized religion and one is folk religion. अब फोक रिलीजन वो रिलीजन होती है जो कॉमन मैन आमतौर पे फॉलो करता है, तो उसको अब उसका कोई लेना देना नहीं। ऑर्गेनाइज्ड रिलीजन है जब आप लोगों को बुलाते हो, लोगों को ट्रेन करते हो, लोगों को सिखाते हो। जो फोक रिलीजन होता है वो हमेशा आपके कल्चर में रूटेड होता है। तो वहां पे आप जैसे फॉर इंस्टेंस अगर आप लेह में, जब हमने पहले पुराने मॉस्क जो बने हुए थे, वो मॉस्क जैसे लगते नहीं थे, वो लेह का जो लद्दाख का जो आर्किटेक्चर है उसी के हिसाब से बने हुए थे। ठीक है, द मॉनेस्ट्री और मॉस्क में हमें कोई ज्यादा फर्क नहीं लगता था, क्योंकि जो उनका रिलीजन था वो उनके फोक रिलीजन या उनके कल्चर में रूटेड था, उनके एनवायरमेंट में रूटेड था। But now with organized religion coming in, things have begun to change. Now we have symbols that if it is a mosque, it has to look like this. If it is a temple, it has to look like this. तो जो folk religion होता है वो कल्चर के साथ जुड़ा होता है हमेशा, और हमेशा हमने जब पीस बरकरार रखना है और जब हमने अपने रूट्स को वापस जाना है, तो हमें हमेशा फोक रिलीजन ढूंढना चाहिए कि फोक रिलीजन में क्या था। जैसे अगर हम अपने again I will give you an example from Punjab. Let us say in the Guru Granth Sahib, the word that occurs most commonly or most frequently is Ram.
Yes.
You see, the word Ram is there a maximum number of times. अगर एक word हम गुरु ग्रंथ साहिब में ढूंढते तो वो word राम है। तो अब देखो, now that is part of our folk religion. वो हमारी folk tradition का हिस्सा है। तो अगर हम इन चीजों को नेगेट करेंगे तो हमें प्रॉब्लम्स आएंगी। अगर हम इनको रिकग्नाइज करेंगे, इनको हम एक्सेप्ट करेंगे और इनको हम परपेचुएट करेंगे। कल्चर को परपेचुएट करना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि इसमें बहुत सारी नॉलेज जुड़ी हुई है, इसमें एनवायरनमेंट को लेके बहुत नॉलेज है। हमारे पास कल्चर, जैसे मैंने एक वो जरावा ट्राइब का एग्जांपल दिया, हमारे पास मेडिसिनल जो नॉलेज है वो हमारे कल्चर में इतनी जनरेशन से, वी हैव अ रिच ट्रेजर ऑफ all of that. So we have to, you know, pass it on. We have to sustain it, and in order to keep our culture alive, and this is a message that I would like to give to the next generation, if we want to keep our culture alive, we have to keep our language alive. क्योंकि जो हमारा कल्चर है वो लैंग्वेज में होता है। जब हम कोई चीज बोलते हैं, जैसे मैंने अभी बोला रक्षाबंधन बोला मैंने, या मैंने रखड़ पुन्या बोला, या मैं संधारा बोलती हूँ, तो इन सब चीजों का कई लोगों के लिए मीनिंग होगा, कई लोगों के लिए नहीं होगा। तो अगर हम ये चीजों को, अगर हम अपनी लैंग्वेज को खत्म कर लेंगे तो हमारा कल्चर भी खत्म हो जाएगा। अगर हमारा कल्चर खत्म हो जाएगा, हमारा ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज बेस खत्म हो जाएगा। कश्मीर की एक बहुत सुंदर साड़ी है, एक बहुत सुंदर सिल्क है। Can you tell me the name of that silk? It is a very special silk.
Is it?
No. It is a silk. It is a silk. No. That is again pashmina. That is wool. Silk भी weave होती है कश्मीर में. And do you know that Kashmir was the first state in India which started weaving silk? सिल्क बनाने का आइडिया इंडिया में कश्मीर ने दिया था हमें।
ओके।
तो वो जो वहाँ की जो कश्मीर की सिल्क है, बिल्कुल ही, इट इज एब्सोल्युटली डेलिकेट क्लॉथ, इट इज वेफर थिन, and I am just forgetting the term for it. I'm getting the name of that.
I think I am wearing it because this is that paper thin and it's of my grandmother, yes, so I'm wearing it. But I have no idea. This is paper thin. This is paper thin.
Yeah, we have lost
my grandmothers.
हाँ, जो इसको हम कहते थे इस सिल्क को, और इसका बहुत सुंदर सा नाम है जो मुझे अभी याद नहीं आ रहा, but yes, it's a very good thing that you have preserved it and you are wearing it. तो इसका नाम भी पता करो, इस सिल्क को क्या कहते हैं, इसका एक स्पेशल नाम है इस सिल्क का, and it is found only in Kashmir.
Yes, so this belongs to my grandmother. So this is the only thing of I have now. So, and it is paper thin. So
that you have over here.
Yes, so that's why I was wearing it for the occasion, but I had never thought this will come up in the Samvaad.
और एक और बात मैं आपको बताऊं कि ये जो है this kind of a silk, you see, it was worn in Kashmir by Kashmiri Pandits.
Yes.
और जब वहां से पंडित्स चले गए, ये सिल्क भी वहां प्रोड्यूस होनी बंद हो गई। I mean, which was such a sad thing. It was such an important thing of Kashmir, such an important produce. It was, जिसको हम कहते हैं ना, वो geographical indicators होते हैं कई चीजें, जैसे हम यहाँ पे बासमती बनाते हैं, या जैसे वो पश्मीना है या शातूश है, वैसे ये सिल्क was also one. This particular silk was also one part of it. तो इन चीजों को और इसके नाम को, इसका नाम पता करो। वैसे मैं बताऊंगी नाम इसको याद करके।
Definitely, even
हाँ,
I will ask my father.
it is I'll tell you the name of this silk. मेरे को याद आ जाएगा। Also, I have to ask your father. Otherwise, I'll tell you इसका नाम याद है।
I'll definitely ask my father, because this was something I never thought कि this will come up, but this is my grandmother's sari, which was passed on to me from my mother. It was given as a blessing to my mother, and now it's with me. So one of
now
the
it's come to you.
now it's come to me, and this is the first time I'm wearing it in the Samvaad, and it is actually quite paper thin, and it is silk. So I was just something which I know will not be there in Kashmir now. So it was something I thought of wearing.
They have stopped. Yeah, they have stopped making it over there now. I tried to look for it on my last visit. I couldn't find it. But sometimes you get it. Yeah, sometimes you get it somewhere. Very rarely. So,
possibly because of the
is,
we don't even know the raw material for it. There must be a scarcity of the raw material as well, because flooding
और
and
इसको उसको ना वीव करने का भी तरीका होगा।
yes,
जो
that is right.
उसको वीव करने वाले वीवर्स हैं वो भी खत्म हो गए होंगे।
Yes, because जैसे जैसे कल्चर शॉक लग रहा है, जैसे जैसे पीपल
हाँ, क्योंकि जो पहनने वाले थे वो खत्म हो गए, तो जो वीव करने वाले थे वो भी चले गए। So this is how cultures kind of die down, or they stay on, or they live on. So that is that is my message to you, that do preserve this sari and pass it on to your daughter as well.
Hopefully, hopefully. This is something which it keeps me reminded of my roots. Something, because I can only view from it's a window view of what I see Kashmir today. I don't know of my culture, just because we have been outstood. So that is one of the things. Now what is happening is in Afghanistan is the same thing. That is
and you know, another very interesting thing is how we carry our culture with us.
Yes.
The fact that you are wearing your sari today, you're wearing it, or maybe you'll wear it on another ceremonial occasion when you would like to remember your grandmother. That is carrying our culture to different lands, and adding to it from there, and then keeping it alive in some manner, associating with people from our own culture. So it's very important to ensure that, and culture is something that does not remain stagnant. It keeps changing.
Yes.
So we form new cultures also. We continue with the old, and it stays in a state of flux. But all the time, culture is governed by, associated with, and in response to our environment. तो जैसे जैसे आपका environment change होगा, वैसे आपका culture change होगा, वैसे आपके thoughts change होंगे, वैसे आपके lifestyle की strategies जो हैं वो change होंगी। तो क्यों कहीं पे खाना बदोश होते हैं, क्यों कहीं पे settled agriculture होता है, तो और इन सब का different culture होता है, जो इनके songs होते हैं, जो उनकी यादें होती हैं। Today I was listening to this song somewhere. Again, it is a Pahadi song only. Shimle nahi jana, Kasauli nahi jana, Chambe jana zarur. You see, Shimla and Kasauli were both colonial towns. They were made by the British. Chamba jo tha, wo Indian town tha. So now this is a lady who says, I don't want to go to those towns. Maybe her husband was in government service. So maybe he was posted in one of those towns. Kahan se wo gana aaya hoga? I was just imagining. So that I don't want to go to Shimla or Kasauli. I want to stay in Chamba. I want to go back to Chamba, which is my roots. So that is what I have to say. And
so moving on to the next question. In a country like India, would you prescribe any sound environmental practices which could be followed, considering the issues of climate change also? Can people be educated in this regard?
हाँ, एक तो हमें ये एक्सेप्ट करना चाहिए, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी हैव टू एक्सेप्ट that the environment and the natural resources, they belong to everybody. First of all, we have to accept that. Yes. The second thing that we need to accept is that the environment and the natural resources are limited. And the third thing that we have to accept is that even though we have technology, we have science, we have overpowered a lot of natural problems and all that, but still ultimately it is nature that is going to remain supreme. So we have to, whenever we are carrying any kind of a developmental program for any region, any state, we must always put our ear to the ground and listen to what the environment has to say about it. अगर हमारी एनवायरनमेंट कहती है कि ऐसा करने से, और ये चीज हमें अपने कल्चर में से पता चल जाएगा, अगर वो हमें कहते हैं कि ये करना ठीक नहीं है, इस मौसम में ये खाना ठीक नहीं है, जो हमारे व्रत हैं वो किस लिए होते हैं, क्योंकि एक पर्टिकुलर मौसम में वी शुड नॉट बी ईटिंग वेरी हेवी फूड, वी हैव टू ईट अ पर्टिकुलर काइंड ऑफ फूड so that keeps our body, it cleanses our body. This is maybe we call it a religious symbol, or we call it a religious tradition, but actually it is our culture, and it is rooted in common sense, it is rooted in pragmatism. So for a country as diverse as India, what I would like to say is that we should not have one development policy. ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर हमें लगे कि सब जगह पे सड़क पहुंचनी है तो सभी जगह पे सड़क पहुंचनी चाहिए, ये कोई जरूरी नहीं है। ऐसा नहीं है चलो सड़क पहुंचे, ऐसा नहीं है कि हर जगह पे 4 लेन हाईवे चाहिए हमें, ठीक है ना। अब हमने ये डिसाइड कर लिया कि 4 धाम की यात्रा जो है हमारी, वो हमने सबके लिए पॉसिबल करनी है, तो हम वहां पे 4 लेन हाईवे बना रहे हैं वहां तक। उसकी वजह से कितना लैंडस्लाइड आ रहा है उस रिवर में, जो हमारा वो द रिवर मंदाकिनी, इट गॉट, अलकनंदा गॉट फ्लडेड सो बैडली, so many people died over there. You see, when you are going on a Char Dham Yatra, we have to think back to our culture. Newly married people don't go to Char Dham Yatras. When somebody used to go to a Char Dham Yatra, they would go, after saying goodbye to everybody, thinking कि पता नहीं अब हम वापस आएंगे भी या नहीं आएंगे. When they had done all their worldly duties, had been performed, they had done everything, then they would leave for a Char Dham Yatra, that now we have to cleanse ourselves of all our sins. तो इतने वास्ट नंबर में हमने उनको टूरिस्ट स्पेसेस बना दिया कि हर कोई मोटरसाइकिल उठा के चला हुआ है, हर कोई गाड़ी उठा के चला हुआ है. तो ऐसी चीजें हमें नहीं करनी चाहिए. हमें सिर्फ for the sake of putting up a Facebook photograph on Facebook that I have done this, I have achieved this, I have reached this place where nobody else has. We should not be playing with environment. We should be respecting environment and environmental constraints. अगर environment हमें कहती है जितना हमारे को environment में उस local context में, मैंने आपके साथ बात की थी हरियाणा की और पंजाब की. हरियाणा में वो अभी भी रेन फेड एग्रीकल्चर प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, बरानी खेती जिसको कहते हैं. तो उसमें वो वही क्रॉप्स ग्रो करते हैं जो लिमिटेड रेनफॉल के साथ पैदा हो जाते हैं. वो जरूरी नहीं है कि वो, देयर आर सम प्लेसेस, ऑफ कोर्स सम प्लेसेस दे आर आल्सो ग्रोइंग राइस for want of more money. So we have to look at the local context. What does the local environment tell us? What does the regional environment tell us? Are we allowed to do that? Will we be happy doing that? जैसे अगर हमारे पास रिवर्स हैं, उन रिवर्स को एक जगह से दूसरी जगह अगर हम डाइवर्ट करेंगे, वो कोई अच्छी बात नहीं है, क्योंकि वो रिवर्स का पानी वेस्ट होगा, वो रिवर्स का पानी खराब होगा, वो रिवर्स में फ्लड्स आएंगे ज्यादा, क्योंकि आप कहीं पे रोकेंगे, कहीं पे उसको लेके जाएंगे. So nature will always claim its own spaces. It will always go in the direction it has to go. We can only live along with nature. We cannot live against nature, because man is just one of millions of species that are living on Mother Earth, and that is something we need to respect. And again, I will give you this message that is again something that we need to go back to our culture. In our Rig Ved, for instance, we have worshipped the rivers. We have, our gods were all nature gods. whether it was the sun god, or it was the moon god, or it was the god of oceans, or it was the god of waters. We worshipped all these things because we knew they were important for our survival. तो हमें इस चीज का ध्यान जरूर रखना है कि ये चीजें जो हैं इनको हम इंडिस्क्रिमिनेटली यूज नहीं कर सकते. हमारी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है हमारी नेक्स्ट जनरेशन की तरफ. हमने अपना कल्चर भी उनको देना है और हमने एनवायरनमेंट को भी उतना ही कष्ट पहुंचाना है जितना वो सहार सके, जितना वो हमारे साथ चल सके, जितना हमारे को वो विथस्टैंड कर सके. So this is the message that I have to give. There is no one cure for everybody, no one cure for all spaces. We have to look for local, these developmental programs. So this is what I have to say as far as the message for India and India's development is concerned. And our development, of course, should be people-centric. What people want. It should not be a top-down approach. कि वहाँ पे ब्यूरोक्रेट आपको जाके बता दे कि ये बहुत अच्छा प्लान है, आप ये करना शुरू कर दो. तो उसमें जो ऑलरेडी लोग जिनकी वो पॉपुलर समझ थी, जिनकी कॉमन जो रूटेड थी, कल्चर में रूटेड थी, वो उससे दूर हो जाएंगे. जैसे लाहौल के लोगों ने अभी आटा और चौल खाना शुरू कर दिया. इट्स नॉट गुड फॉर देम. Rice is very good for Kashmiris because they grow rice over there.
Grey soil है वहाँ पे, तो वो भी because
they have that kind of soil.
Yes, because productivity वैसी रही है कि they did not require pesticides. So culture and so culture environment के साथ interlinked है. This is a very informative knowledge. And क्या environmental practices निकली हैं अपनी culture के through. This is something which I had actually no knowledge of, कि हमारा environment culture से भी affected होता है, और अगर दोनों साथ में रहे तो ही environment को हम आगे future generations के लिए भी रख सकते हैं. Thank you so much. आज का ये संवाद बहुत प्रोडक्टिव रहा. हमने जो आपकी ये जो नॉलेज रही है, इट इज वेरी प्रोफाउंड नॉलेज, एंड आई नो मैंने आपका बहुत समय लिया है इस चीज के लिए. बहुत सारी हमने कल्चरल एस्पेक्ट्स को भी कवर किया है एनवायरनमेंट के साथ. आई डिड नॉट रियलाइज.
I would like to, I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity and a platform to voice my own passions. I am very passionate about this. And I really thank you for giving me the opportunity of sharing my thoughts with, people apart from my own class and my students. वो तो सुनते ही हैं बेचारे.
Yes, but this is a very informative session. I just to know about different cultures, and in fact about Jammu and Kashmir as well. What was the culture at that point of time, and how it was. It feels good, because this kind of a knowledge, I think people need to know about our culture, how integrated we are, and how this our culture has actually influenced our environment practices. So this is something very informative.
It does. It comes out of your environment, certainly.
Thank you so much, Smriti ji. I will just now end the session of Samvaad.